Hello and welcome back to Coach Bill's Sports Show. As always, I'm Coach Bill. Thank you for joining us. If it's your first time with us, please like, comment, follow, all that good stuff. Subscribe, not follow. Different platform. Anyways, today we're going to go into our power rankings for this week. So let me get that up here. Boom. Just like so. There we go. So, this week on the power rankings, it's our second week of doing these. There's definitely going to be some changes. As I said in my video on Monday, when I wrapped up this week of games, UCLA really made me take a look at the teams and how they were set up, because they were not showing up on my rankings the way that I believe they should have. I found pretty glaring hole in my algorithm, and we went back and addressed it. So let's get into it. First things first, we're going to get into some honorable mentions. These are essentially my next 5 from the top 25. You got NC State, South Carolina, Baylor, Minnesota, and Kansas. Kansas is dealing with some issues on the health front of their quarterback. Some reports are it's the season ender. Some reports are that he may be able to come back. We just don't know. Same with NC State. NC State's dealing with some health issues. The one on this list that I can see starting to climb is South Carolina. They had a big win against Kentucky. They still have some wins that they can hit before they hit the rough patch of their season. So I can definitely see them climbing into the top 25, maybe even higher, depending on if they can pull an upset in their last 3 games. But those are our honorable mentions. Let's go ahead and get into our top 25. So at number 25, we got Penn State. Number 24, we have Liberty. Liberty's had a lot of close games and a lot of bigger games for a smaller team. Then we have 23 at Florida, 22 at Mississippi State. Mississippi State is one of those teams that if they're probably 1 or 2 wins away from really skyrocketing in these rankings. Same with Purdue. Purdue is 1 or 2 wins away from starting to really shoot up the rankings here. I think that's the case for a couple on the next set, the next tier, I guess is what you call it. However you want to break it down, of 20 to 16. But watch for Purdue and Mississippi State and Penn State, depending on how they play Michigan this week, to really make a climb in the rankings. So, top 20. Number 20, we got Syracuse. 19, the Fighting Illini. Texas Tech is 18. Kentucky, even after a loss, is at 17. Texas, after a huge win against Oklahoma, is at number 16. Texas has got another big game this week. Essentially, from here on out, Texas has big games every week if they want to stay in the competition for the Big 12. They're still there. They're still fighting for it. But can they pull it off? That's the question. They got a little bit of luck that needs to go their way. But outside of that, they have, if Quinn Ewers hadn't been hurt for 2 games, there would have been a lot more hype around Texas. And there's about to be a lot more around them. Next up, we have 15 through 11. So 15 and 14 actually play each other this week in USC and Utah. Big late matchup game. We're going to go into breakdown on that on Friday with the games we're looking forward to this weekend. Another one you should expect to see for the games this weekend is Oklahoma State. Then we got Oregon and Wake Forest. Wake Forest isn't slipping It's just other teams have jumped them. Wake Forest was in our top 10 last week. They did drop to the 11th spot, but that's more about the teams that you're going to see in the top 10 than about Wake Forest itself. So there's definitely going to be a shakeup here in our probably 11 to 20 rankings at the end of this week with some of the games that are on the slate. Again, we'll discuss that on Friday's Look Ahead show. But let's get into our top 10. Number 10, Kansas State. Kansas State is one of those teams that was pitched early in the year about being able to be that kind of underdog that could take the title, that black sheep. But they're being fairly impressive so far. Not as impressive as the next one on the list, though. Number 9, UCLA. So UCLA had a lot of doubters, and I'm one of them. They didn't really play that tough of a schedule to start the season, but it definitely seems like that helped them find a groove. So going into the Utah game, they were able to do what they did against Utah. And now they've got Oregon coming up, and then the big one for them is USC on November 19th. So a very big one for UCLA there. Number 8's got big ones pretty much this week and then the end of the season into the regular season for them, and that's Michigan. Michigan hosts Penn State in their first real test of the season. A lot of Michigan's numbers are looking really, really good, but that's because they haven't really played that much competition. The other side of it, Penn State has gone on the road. They have put up points, and they're a strong team. We'll break down that game fully on the Friday show. That's definitely going to be on there. Number 7, a little bit of surprise for some people, but TCU. TCU, the Horned Frogs, are definitely showing me some stuff. Big win against Kansas at Kansas, both undefeated teams. I believe TCU's got Oklahoma State. It's either this week or it's coming up soon. But they definitely have a big next little stretch of games for TCU. And depending on how it plays out, yeah, they've got Oklahoma State this week, and then they got Kansas State next week. So, nice little stretch for them. If TCU continues to go undefeated, big win against Oklahoma State, big win against, I can't remember what I just said. If they can get a big win against Oklahoma State and Kansas State, TCU could be pushing for a playoff picture. They're just on the outside looking in right now. But definitely in contention. Number 6 is going to surprise some people. It's Ohio State. Factored in a lot of who they've played and how those teams have played outside of playing Ohio State, and it really showed me that they haven't really been tested like that. Ohio State does have some tougher games. I think they still have a road trip to Happy Valley. They also have a game against Michigan, which happens every year. Still on the schedule. So, yeah, they've got Iowa up ahead, and then Penn State. So Ohio State's on a bye this week. Then they've got Iowa, Penn State, Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland, and then they end the season with Michigan. So for Ohio State, really October 29th, the trip to Happy Valley, and then November 26th when they play that team up north, is definitely going to be the deciding factor for Ohio State. Will they make the college playoffs? Let's be real. If Ohio State goes undefeated, it's going to be extremely hard to keep them out of the playoffs. Currently, for me, they're on the outside looking in simply because they haven't really played much competition right now. Some people that have played some competition. Let's start with Ole Miss at number 5. Ole Miss has definitely been, they've not been the offense that they've been in the past, but they've been a more complete team this year, which is surprising. A lot of what you're going to see here from 5 to 1 is really going to shake itself out because a lot of it's in the SEC. It's just kind of the nature of the SEC. When you have big games, you can play big games, the algorithm is going to carry a lot of weight with those games. So ranked opponents, ranked road opponents definitely carry a lot of weight. Talking about ranked opponents, next on the list is Georgia. Georgia had a big ranked game at the early part of the season that pushed them up in the rankings for me, and then it's kind of been, status quo for Georgia essentially, which doesn't really change until the last week of October. So they have Vanderbilt this weekend, then they get a bye, and then they go to the largest cocktail party in America or in the world. I can never remember the name on that game. I know it's cocktail party, but against Florida, and then they have Tennessee that comes into Athens. So what team do we see at that point in time? Is Tennessee a one-loss team, or are they undefeated? There's a lot of stuff right there, but that's the start of a stretch for them where they have Tennessee, then they go to Mississippi State, who is no slouch. They're definitely going to keep climbing the rankings, and then they have a game at Kentucky as well. So a nice 3-game stretch there for Georgia. We definitely are going to learn a lot about them from essentially a 4-game stretch with Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi State, and Kentucky. We'll learn a lot about where Georgia is right now and if they're ready to try to repeat as national champions. But one of the teams that is standing in their way, number 3, Tennessee. Number 3, Tennessee has a tough stretch of their own they're in right now. They have arguably, I would say, one of the toughest 5-game stretches that I've seen this season. And yes, I'm a Tennessee fan, so I'm a little biased. But going to LSU, ranked LSU on the road, doing what they did last week. They have Alabama coming into their house this week. Yes, then they turn around and they have UT Martin. I apologize to UT Martin. Your homecoming game, and it's not going to look pretty. Then they have Kentucky coming into Knoxville, and then the trip to Athens, Georgia. Those 5 games, 4 of those games are extremely difficult. Never discount a trip into LSU. Death Valley has called it for a reason. Alabama, for those of you who are not over 20, you don't understand really the history behind this game. I don't want to say you don't understand, but you haven't been able to see the history behind this game. This game is huge for Knoxville. This game is huge for the SEC. This rivalry between Alabama and Tennessee. This is the first time they've met undefeated since 1989 in Knoxville. So I was 2 at the time. Hell, I wasn't even 2. I was 1 at the time. Hadn't hit my 2nd birthday yet because this is the 3rd week in October. But ask some of your older, ask your parents, ask your older brothers. This game really means something to those fan bases. It used to really mean something to those fan bases. Yes, Alabama's on a 15 or 16 game win streak against Tennessee, but either way, this is one of those games where it's going to be loud. It's going to be extremely loud in Knoxville, and it's going to be one hell of a game. I'm setting up 2 TVs on Saturday, so I don't have to turn one of them off of the Tennessee game. It's going to be that exciting for me. But talking about another team that's got a game that, you just got to understand the team to understand is Clemson. Clemson has Florida State this weekend. Now, for most people, they're going to look at Clemson, Florida State, and it's just going to be whatever. Because let's be real. I mean, Clemson should handle Florida State fairly well. There shouldn't be much of an issue for Clemson. The question becomes, since it's at Florida State, what does Florida State show? This is essentially Florida State's Super Bowl. This season, if they can beat Clemson in Florida State, it sets a precedence for that team and for the next little bit. Plus, Clemson turns around next week and has undefeated Syracuse coming in. So do they get caught looking ahead? Florida State's got a solid offense. They've got some big plays that they make, but they haven't made them against the caliber of defense that Clemson has. So how does it play out? We'll be looking at that one on Friday as well. It's a late game, and I'm happy it's a late game so I can pay it a little bit more attention. And then it's not even close. Alabama, number one. What they've been able to show with winning with a backup quarterback, still being extremely competitive, still being dominant in positions they have, and with it being a backup quarterback, Alabama has shown they are hands down the best team in college football right now. And we haven't even seen the best Alabama yet. They have not been 100% healthy since the Texas game, I believe. They've had somebody dinged up in a starting capacity since Texas. So we haven't seen 100% from them. Just to show a little bit of behind the curtains, we actually have some tiers that we put out just to show the difference between these teams. So tier 1 is the 850 plus club. That's how 850 points in our algorithm means you're a dominant team. And that's Alabama and Clemson. They've just shown it this season. And the scary thing right now is that neither one of those two teams is finished growing. And neither one of them has played their best football yet, which is extremely scary. Tier 2 there's that 750 to 650. That's the playoff caliber teams. That's just on the cusp. They could beat one of the top teams. If one of the top teams has a bad day and one of the tier 2 teams has a good day, they could definitely beat one of these top teams. And that's Tennessee, Georgia, and Ole Miss, which leads up to a lot of good football ahead. Tennessee plays Alabama and Georgia. Ole Miss plays Alabama. There's a lot of football yet to be played between these teams up here for the SEC. Tier 3, they are in striking distance for these top teams. And that's Ohio State, TCU, and Michigan. Ohio State, Michigan's going to decide itself, essentially. And the way it looks right now, as long as Michigan and Ohio State handle their business against Penn State, it's essentially going to be a play-in game for the Big Ten representative to the college football playoffs. Is what that game's lining up as. I'm not saying Ohio State can't beat Alabama or Clemson, because they can. They have the talent. They've also been playing without some of their more talented people as well. I'm just saying it's a little bit harder for the Tier 3 group to be national champions from what I've seen so far this year. Tier 4, your UCLA, Kansas State, Wake Forest, Oregon, Oklahoma State, and Utah's. And USC is right there as well. There's really like 3-point difference between Utah and USC. But what it's showing me is these teams are on the rise. or if they're not on the rise, they are becoming more competitive. Wake Forest doesn't really have a shot at the ACC championship this year because of the loss to Clemson already. But what they do have is a team that is built to compete with some people and really surprise some people. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, that conference is going to figure itself out. But it is honestly the most entertaining conference of this season, simply because any given week in the Big 12, somebody can get beat by somebody else. And I don't mean that as like, any weekend. It's literally every game is a must-win if you want to win that conference, because everybody else is viewing it that way. And it's a phenomenal product. Not a lot of defense, but they've never been big on defense in the Big 12. The other conference that's represented in there heavily is UCLA, Oregon, and Utah, and USC. I'll just add USC because they're in that area. But those are your four front runners for the Pac-12. That's essentially your Pac-12 races, those four teams. Whoever beats the other teams more from that group is your champion for the Pac-12. So that's our breakdown. That's our rankings for this week. If you got any comments, concerns, you think I'm missing on some teams, you think there's a team out there I'm not giving enough respect to, write it down below. Leave me a comment. Let's take a look. I'm always adjusting this algorithm. It's not perfect. It never will be. There's always more information we can put into it. So the more we can put into it, the more knowledge we have, the better off we are. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Ready, break.